So Nintendo just released Wave 4 of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass, and this wave has definitely continued the trend of each being even better than the last. Everything from the track selection to the graphics to the music has been made even better since Wave 3, which was already phenomenal, and there is no doubt in my mind that this is the best wave yet. In fact, this is the first wave where I can truly say I absolutely love every single track it contains, which will make this video a little bit more difficult to make, given that in this video I'm going to be ranking all 8 courses in Wave 4 of the Booster Course Pass from worst to best. And like I just mentioned, even the last place spot on this list I think is absolutely phenomenal. Nintendo seems to be putting more and more effort into each wave we see, and I am all for it. As always, keep in mind that this list is comprised entirely of my opinions, and is in no way fact or the definitive ranking, and if you guys have a different ranking of the tracks, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. I love seeing which tracks you guys like the most. Now with all that out of the way, let's roll the intro and get into my ranking of all the Wave 4 courses in the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. And up first in our last place spot is Tour Bangkok Rush. And before I talk about why it's in last place, let me talk about all the great things about this track first. Graphically speaking, Bangkok Rush definitely outshines quite a few of the past city tracks in the Booster Course Pass, though definitely not all of them, as it is still pretty apparent that the model is ported straight from Mario Kart Tour. However, a lot of the textures, especially the main road texture itself, look extremely detailed, and I honestly really appreciate that. They really look like they could have been from a base game track, even if the model of the course doesn't. The textures on some of the buildings have also been given light reflecting properties, which makes them look really good in the sunset environment. The music of this track is also really good, still reflecting the music style of Bangkok while also keeping that big band jazz feel that Mario Kart 8 has. I mean, when have you ever heard a jazz flute solo before? Take a listen to this. The Mario Kart band, as always, knocked it out of the park. But now let's get to the actual gameplay of the track, which is actually where its greatest strengths and weaknesses come from. Throughout a decent chunk of the course, there's a top route and a bottom route that you're able to choose from, and on the top route, there are also multiple branching paths. While the bottom route is typically faster, the top routes do have some incentives to go up there, such as coins and item boxes, which implements one of my favorite things to be in Mario Kart courses, which is risk versus reward. But that's also where one of the main problems with this course comes in. You see, a lot of the top routes are extremely narrow, which makes it difficult for multiple racers to be up there. And these narrow roads combined with the super sharp turns that are on some of these top routes make it almost impossible not to crash into the wall on 200cc when trying to take these turns. There's also the problem that the multiple different sections of this track don't really feel distinct from one another. While there are unique locations in every lap, they still all feel somewhat the same and blend together because they all feel incredibly congested with all the buildings around you, as well as all the turns being very sharp and the roads very narrow. This is a problem that many city tracks fall victim to, however, it's extremely apparent in Bangkok Rush. While the gameplay can oftentimes be frustrating and that's what's caused it to be this low on this list, I still think this is a very fun course to play once you get used to a lot of its gameplay tropes. And the fact that I'm able to say that about the last place spot really is a testament to how good Wave 4 is. But moving on to our 7th place spot, we have Tour Amsterdam Drift. While Amsterdam Drift does look slightly graphically worse than Bangkok Rush, it definitely makes up for it in terms of gameplay, and it still does look better than a few of the other city tracks. Once again, the road texture and tiling is phenomenal here. However, the buildings surrounding the track do look extremely flat, and it's very apparent that they are low poly models. However, since a lot of them aren't directly next to the track and you'll be going by them pretty fast, they don't look half bad during gameplay. But before we get to the actual gameplay of this track, let me quickly mention that the music on this course is also phenomenal. The Mario Kart band absolutely nailed the theming of this track, and the accordion absolutely goes off. Take a listen to this. I swear I won't interrupt the video for every track to talk about the music, but this one was just so good, and I love that little accordion riff at the end of the clip I just played. Gameplay-wise, the roads are definitely a lot wider in most cases than in Bangkok Rush, and there aren't as many sharp turns as well. Now, that's not to say there aren't any sharp turns on this track, because there are actually quite a few 90-degree turns. However, the difference between these and the ones in Bangkok Rush is that you actually have enough room to make them, given that the road is much wider. They're still somewhat challenging on 200cc, but that actually adds a nice level of difficulty to the track, rather than being so difficult that it becomes frustrating. This track also doesn't suffer as much from its different areas blending together, given that its 3 unique sections have completely different surrounding scenery, making them feel so much more distinct from one another. The first section is similar to many other city tracks, where you're going through the streets of Amsterdam. However, the second one has you going into the city's canals, which is incredibly cool in my opinion, and is a great use of the game's underwater physics. And the final section has you driving through a field of tulips, which are so vibrant when you're driving by them, even if when you stop to look at them up close, they're pretty low poly. The gameplay certainly isn't perfect on this track, but it is still pretty solid, and while the graphics do still leave quite a lot to be desired, it's definitely not as bad as some of the Wave 1 and even some of the Wave 2 courses, and overall, I am very happy with this track. But then, moving on to our 6th place spot, we have DS Mario Circuit. When this course was first revealed to be in Wave 4, many people, including myself, were kinda disappointed, given that there were so many great DS tracks that could have taken its place instead. Not to mention, from what we saw in the trailer, it did not look graphically good at all, with the textures having very little detail reminiscent of a Wave 1 or Wave 2 course. But now that we've actually got to see it in-game, not only does it play really well, but it also graphically does not look half bad. In fact, I'd say it looks really good in a lot of places, and the lighting in the forest section looks absolutely phenomenal. And by the way, that same forest section is an entirely new addition to the track, which I absolutely love because it really makes this track feel much more distinct from other Mario circuits. I also really like how the trees look in this track, as they look very similar to how they did back in Mario 64 and of course Mario Kart DS. However, they do have a decent amount of detail on them. The same can also be said for the sand texture and the textures on the castle in the middle of the track, as they look very good in my opinion. The grass texture is still a little bit bland, but it does have some detail, and it's definitely not as flat as we had first thought when we got our first look at the track. The only thing I really dislike visually on this course is the starting banner, which is such an insignificant part of the track that really it doesn't matter that it looks pretty flat texture-wise. Gameplay-wise, the track is super satisfying to drive, with a few great shortcuts and a lot of turns that are very satisfying to pull off. The fire piranha plants on this track are also completely new additions to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I love the way they're animated. Their fireballs are also decently difficult to dodge, adding a nice layer of challenge to the track. There's now also a large wiggler that walks around the forest section of the track on lap 3, adding even more tension to the final stretch of the race. However, when the wiggler starts walking around, it actually doesn't correspond to what lap you're on, and rather to how long the race has been going on. So on 200cc, you're actually able to go through the entire race without ever having the wiggler on the track, which I've just realized was the case in my recording session that I did for this video, which is why you're getting some trailer footage of the wiggler instead. Overall, I'd say this is my favorite Mario circuit in the game, and one of my favorite circuits in this game in general. And though I rather would have seen Diaz Airship Fortress or Delfino Square, this was still a phenomenal track, and I'm really glad it did get into the Booster Course Pass. But then, moving on to our 5th place spot, we have one of the best looking courses graphically in this wave. We have GBA Riverside Park. Almost every single texture on this course looks like it was pulled straight out of Mario Kart 8's base game, and the modeling isn't half bad either, even though it is very similar to the model that's used in Mario Kart Tour. I will say the trees do look somewhat out of place because those are probably the most similar thing in the track to their appearance in Mario Kart Tour. However, the rest of the course looks absolutely phenomenal. And this track also has one of my favorite remixes out of all of Wave 4. Riverside Park's remix takes more of a funk jazz interpretation of the original song rather than the big band feel that the rest of Mario Kart 8's soundtrack has, and I love it. It sounds so smooth. It honestly reminds me quite a bit of a lot of the music in the Donkey Kong Country games, and the baritone saxophone being used as the bass line rather than a bass guitar really cements this track's music as having a really unique feel. Take a quick listen. Gameplay-wise, this track is not slacking either. Similar to GBA Snowland from Wave 2, it is a shorter course, but it is still incredibly fun to drive. Rather than being entirely flat like the original, GBA Riverside Park has gotten a lot of elevation changes to make the gameplay more engaging, and now the loop section has you going through a giant cave and out a waterfall that's flowing into the actual river of Riverside Park. There are also now brand new enemies to the Mario Kart series, Patuis, roaming around the track. Because the Patuis walk around almost the entire course, they can be somewhat difficult to avoid, adding a nice level of challenge to the track. They also have the brand new gimmick of blowing an item above them that when you hit them either with your cart or with a projectile, will launch in front of you for you to either drive into or use, or it will become an obstacle for other racers, depending on what item the Patui was blowing above it. And since you can see what item will be launched in front of you before you actually hit the Patui, this adds a really nice level of strategy to the course. I feel like the best remakes in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are the GBA ones, since they always have such dramatic changes from their originals and feel like almost entirely new courses. And Riverside Park is not breaking that trend. In fact, I feel like it could have won the ranking for a few past waves. It's just the rest of the tracks in Wave 4 are so good. And that brings us to the second half of this list and our 4th place spot, which is Tour Singapore Speedway. And there's a reason Nintendo decided to open the Wave 4 trailer this way. This is by far the best city track that we've gotten in the DLC yet. And it's also the best looking city track graphically, as the nighttime aesthetic blends perfectly with all the bright lights of the city, pulling off a similar effect to how New York Minute did back in Wave 2. And while, if you do look closely, the textures and modeling are very clearly from Mario Kart Tour, when you're actually driving the track, this is not apparent at all because the lighting is so phenomenal on this track. There's also a custom cannon object that's been added to the course, which is the first time we've actually seen one in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, because previous DLC courses that used a cannon just reused the cannon from N64 Yoshi Valley. And we actually got 2 custom cannons in this wave, one of which is in a track that I haven't talked about yet, and I think this is really indicative of the amount of effort that Nintendo is starting to put into these DLC courses. They could have easily just reused the cannon from the base game, but the fact that they decided not to and instead to model a brand new cannon really makes the track feel so much more immersive. Gameplay-wise, the course really builds upon what was good on Amsterdam Drift, with many turns that are really rewarding to pull off while not being too difficult to do on 200cc, as well as multiple distinct sections that are easily discernible from one another. There's of course your main section, which you drive a little bit of on every lap, which is essentially just going through the streets of Singapore. But then you also end up driving on the tops of buildings up high in the sky, with the entire city beneath you. This then takes you to a downwards glider section through multiple boost rings, and then to multiple turns that take you into lap 2. Lap 2 will have you take a few more turns and then go into the Chinatown section of Singapore, which is by far the most unique portion of this track. So unique, in fact, that it actually got its own rendition of the Singapore Speedway theme that plays whenever you go through the Chinatown section. You then go off of a glider ramp and through these super cool looking fountains that you're able to trick off of, and then you enter lap 3, where you end up taking multiple turns over Toad's factory style conveyor belts. After another glider section, you can choose either to go on another rooftop, albeit a much lower one than before, or back on the ground. Both will then deposit you onto a boost ramp that will take you back into Chinatown. Only this time you'll end up going through it entirely backwards, and then after the next few turns going through Chinatown, you'll be put back into the main Singapore City area and you'll go through the final finish line. Even though Singapore Speedway has so many different sections, they all manage to feel distinct from one another, while also feeling like one cohesive track. And in my opinion, that's something that all Mario Kart tracks should aspire to do. Have variety throughout the course while also having consistent theming. And while this is something that multiple other city tracks have failed miserably at in the past, with all their different details just blending together and not having any distinction from one another, Singapore Speedway has pulled this off flawlessly. Not to mention the track's music is really good, having a sort of bouncy electronic feel. And if the future city tracks have music and gameplay as good as this, I am really looking forward to playing them. But then moving on to our 3rd place spot, which is the track that is in contention with Lakeside Park to be the best looking graphically in this wave, we have GCN Waluigi Stadium. All the bright neon lights contrast perfectly with the night sky, similar to Waluigi Pinball, but the dirt on the ground also glistens as if it's just rained, and it looks so good. But not only does this track look absolutely phenomenal, but it's also had some changes made to its gameplay from its original version and its version of Mario Kart Wii that makes it the best version of the track yet. The half pipes on the track have returned from Mario Kart Wii, and in my opinion, they're even more fun to trick off of than ever, and and now they give you pretty much full-on mushroom boosts rather than the little mini turbo boost that they gave you back in Mario Kart Wii. This was probably in Wave 3 as well, however, because the half-pipes weren't used too much in Wave 3, it wasn't really that apparent. But since the half-pipes were used so much in this course and in another course that's later in this video, it's very clear that they give you much more of a boost than they used to. The section with the mechanical piranha plants has also changed to have some of them facing diagonally rather than all of them just facing horizontally. I honestly really like this change a lot because the physics of the half-pipes being different in this game makes it so you go right through the diagonal piranha plants when you go off of the half-pipe, which wouldn't have worked as well if the piranha plants were still all placed horizontally. There's also the return of some off-road shortcuts that are pretty satisfying to pull off, and you can also ride the wall on most of the track, meaning that you're able to cut turns really close. But by far the coolest new addition to this track is that you can now, if you take the half-pipe correctly, go off of the half-pipe onto an upper path that's an anti-gravity on 2 of the half-pipe sections, one of which is right after the section with the mechanical piranha plants, and the other is in the turn directly after. Now, the first one is somewhat slower than the normal path because it's not on the inside lane, but you're able to get an item set early up there, so it could be worth it during an online race. The second one, however, I'm pretty sure is on par in terms of speed with the lower path because you can get multiple spin boosts up there. Not to mention, you're able to avoid items from other racers if you're in an online race by going up onto this top path. Going up to these top routes is so much fun because the physics of the half-pipes makes it so satisfying to go off of them. And overall, this version of the track has turned it from one that I honestly didn't like that much back in Mario Kart Double Dash and in Mario Kart Wii to one of my favorite GameCube tracks of all time. The gameplay is so much more engaging now, and the track pretty much feels like it was built for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And if all that wasn't enough, the remix of the course's song is so good. It perfectly embodies the fun chaos of tricking off pretty much everything in sight. And all the saxophones and the trumpet just playing together really just feels like Waluigi. I mean, just listen to this. This honestly just really makes me want Mushroom Bridge to return even more just to hear what the Mario Kart band does with that course's music. I would have said this course was pretty much perfect, but there were somehow in Wave 4 alone 2 courses that were even better than it, and that brings us to our second place spot, which is actually a brand new track, Yoshi's Island. This track pretty much got a complete overhaul, similar to some of the tracks that were from other franchises back in the Mario Kart 8 DLC on the Wii U. There's a custom course start theme, there are custom outro themes that change depending on what place you get. There's even a custom coin sound effect for when you get the coins, which now also look like Yoshi coins. This track has gotten so much love and overall feels like pretty much a complete love letter to the Yoshi's Island franchise. While a few details in the model do make it apparent this was originally made to be in Mario Kart Tour, that honestly really fits with the Yoshi's Island theme. Because many of the Yoshi games have somewhat of a craft-like aesthetic, that works perfectly with the Yoshi's Island course being in the Mario Kart Tour art style, because it almost looks intentional as if it's made of clay or felt in some areas. And even the textures that look somewhat like clay aren't entirely flat like a lot of the other Mario Kart Tour courses. Pretty much every texture has at least some level of detail, which I really do appreciate. Gameplay-wise, this course also has a pretty engaging layout, with multiple twisty turns throughout, as well as multiple enemies from the Yoshi's Island games scattered throughout the track. At the start, there are 2 stilt guys where if you run into them, you'll spin out, and there's also a Huffin' Puffin, where if you throw anything at it, or if you run into it, you or the projectile will bounce back. There are also multiple NPCs from the Yoshi's Island games as well, such as the birds that are flying throughout the sky, and Poochie, who's lying on a mailbox at the start of the track. The track also has multiple different biome areas, which represent the different areas in the original Yoshi's Island SNES game. And there's even a shortcut that you're able to take to cut a turn if you hit off of this glider section a cloud question mark block, which then spawns in a red bridge for you to drive on, which takes the turn really tight and saves you quite a bit of time and allows you to go through a goal ring going into the next lap. This course is bursting at the seams with charm and I absolutely love it. The amount of references throughout is absolutely insane, and I feel like Yoshi's Island really did deserve this track to honor one of the greatest SNES games of all time in my opinion. And speaking of the original SNES Yoshi's Island, the music of this track is actually a rearrangement of that game's athletic theme. The theme has been taken and changed into more of a swing style arrangement, which I absolutely love. Take a listen. It honestly reminds me a lot of the 8-bit Big Band's arrangement of the athletic theme from Yoshi's Island, which is one of my favorite covers that they've done. I don't think there's anything I could change about this course, even graphically, since the graphical style of Mario Kart Tour really fits the craft-like aesthetic of Yoshi's Island. So how the heck do you beat that? Well, it looks like all you have to do is bring back one of the greatest courses in Mario Kart history. In our first place spot, we have, of course, Mario Kart Wii's DK Summit. As I've said in the past, I think this is one of the best Mario Kart tracks of all time in terms of track design. And in my opinion, it's even better than it was in Mario Kart Wii in its Booster Course Pass version. It is definitely my favorite course so far in the Booster Course Pass, and one of my favorite courses in the entirety of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. There are half pipes that go along pretty much the entire course, and like I mentioned when I was talking about Waluigi Stadium, they are so much fun to go off of in this game, as they give you pretty much full-on mushroom boosts. They even go around some turns, allowing you to bring back the turn skips from Mario Kart Wii by going off the half pipe, and it takes you around the turn on the most inside lane possible. The patches of snow that act as off-road have also returned, however, they now also give an effect to the sides of your screen, making it frost over, which in my opinion is a really cool little detail. But probably the greatest part of this track as a whole is that they brought back the double shortcut from Mario Kart Wii, and you can do it shroomless on 150cc very easily. In fact, you can even overshoot it like I did in this clip. And if it's easy to pull off on 150cc, it's even easier on 200, although it is a lot easier as well to overshoot it, so you have to be careful whenever you decide to take it. Or if you want to be safe, you could just take one of the two single shortcuts instead. Graphically, this course does not disappoint either, as though there are a few details that once again make it apparent that it is from Mario Kart Tour. The snow has been made incredibly detailed, and it even has the tire marks of previous racers driving on it. This is also the other course I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about Singapore Speedway that has a custom cannon, because the DK Summit cannon has snow all over it, which looks really cool. The mist that gradually cleared away every lap back in Mario Kart Wii has been removed in this version, but honestly, I do prefer that, because now you get to see the clear sky the entire track, which has been made even more blue in this version. What has returned from Mario Kart Wii, however, are these snowboarding Shy Guys that go off the half pipes in the final section, which add a nice bit of difficulty to the course. There's also the Jumbotron, which is right behind this section, which follows whatever you're doing the entire race. The Mario statue from Mario Kart Wii has also been replaced with a Donkey Kong statue, which does make a lot of sense given that it is DK Summit, and before there was absolutely nothing to indicate it was a Donkey Kong track. And as if the gameplay alone wasn't enough to carry this course to our first place spot, the music remix is also spot on, featuring a lot of electric guitar and really embodying the epic feel of DK Summit. Even though there are a few tracks in the base game that I do prefer over DK Summit, I will say it is probably the most fun I have ever had playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And even though on this list the third and second place tracks were pretty much perfect, there is not a shadow of a doubt in my mind that this is by far the #1 track in Wave 4 of the Booster Course Pass. But what do you all think? Do you think Bangkok Rush is the best track in Wave 4 simply because it has the bouncy tent section at the end of the track? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below, as well as your ranking for the rest of the courses in Wave 4. I was a little bit sick during the making of this video. Again, I hate cold and flu season. So that's why my voice sounded a little bit different during some portions of this video. So thank you so much for sticking around to the end regardless of that. If you liked the video, then why don't you hit the like button? I mean, if you got this far in the video, you probably did like it. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure to subscribe so you get notified whenever I upload more videos. With all that out of the way, thank you all for watching. I'm Jacob with the Game Block, signing off.